You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. Maximum Medicine here. I'm here with Dr. Sam Shay. Now, I don't know exactly how I was introduced to Dr. Sam, but what I've found in the reading I've done, and he's going to tell you all about it, is here is a healer who has gone from chiropractic to acupuncture to functional medicine to DNA, the whole gamut. So I want him to tell us what he's seeing nowadays in his clients and some help for us, because let's face it, the world is crazy and we need help to stay centered. We need help to stay chill. But Dr. Sam, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. I really appreciate all public educators,
Mhm.
podcasts, hosts, summit leaders, etc.
Mhm.
This type of public education was just simply not available 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Mhm.
And the entire reason I got into this field was because I was deeply unwell as a child, starting at age 6. And
Yeah,
the
tell us, because I saw that in your website. You've managed to heal a lot of ailments. Tell us about that.
Sure. So my story, like the details of my story differ, but the story arc is very familiar to most people. It's the story of the wounded healer, Chiron. It's so
Mhm.
cliche. It's a constellation. Not that I'm tying in astrology to this. It's just it's
Mhm.
around so long that it's literally across thousands of years, across multiple cultures. The trope of a wounded healer. A wounded healer, in short, is the person themselves or a dear friend or family member was incredibly sick, but usually it's the person themselves. And then through their entire long, circuitous healing journey arc, they pick up a lot of tools and understandings and frameworks that they use to help with themselves. And then they just want to reduce suffering for those around them. They don't want others to suffer as they did.
Mhm.
So it becomes their passion and their profession to share all the frameworks and tools. Because it's just they know how awful it is to suffer with physical and physiological and psychological concerns, and they just want the suffering to stop. So that's the arc. The
Mhm.
details, in short, because there's a lot of details, but I'll just keep it really brief. It started when I was 6 years old, and my parents had a nuclear divorce in which me and my siblings were caught in the blast radius, and so it was very deeply unhealthy and damaging. And on top of that, this was the 80s, so there was like high gluten, high carb, low fat diets and lots of chemicals, fast food, boxed cereals,
Mhm.
candy, SpaghettiOs. I mean, it's and just Heinz ketchup. Like it's just all. I mean, it's amazing that it even survived. Just it was just pretty much just terrible food, which led to really terrible digestive problems, embarrassing gut problems, and a failure to thrive. On top of that, I had crippling insomnia for over 10 years because of the gaslighting and emotional uh, abuse at home, and then the physical abuse at school with a lot of violence at school. And this was the 80s where you were just told to rub some dirt in it. And then I also contracted Lyme disease at summer camp, but I didn't know that till decades later. And I was just sickly and unwell and tired and a target. And I
That's a whole
developed
bunch of bad things all landing on you, isn't it?
as a child, yeah,
Yeah.
and then I developed a sugar addiction and a video game addiction to try to cope.
Mhm.
And my I decided as a teenager that I had to take charge of my own health because the options that were presented to me were both and for fun, both my parents are psychiatrists,
Mhm.
and so their answer was to drug me into submission. And I decided that the tools for what I had going for me, the tools of Western medicine were not the right choice. So
That's pretty wise as a teenager to be able to suss that out.
it was pretty desperate, and I fortunately found someone who had a more natural frame of mind
Hmm.
that was able to mentor me. I also ran into by sheer luck, Dr. Jensen's Guide to Better Bowel Care, which was
Hmm.
he's considered the kind of godfather of naturopathy in the West. And that book radically changed my thinking. I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor in my family, but took a pivot into natural medicine. And then I just went to college, did a glorified pre-med with extra medical anthropology, philosophy, and organic chemistry, and then did a holistic health practitioner degree on evenings and weekends and got into yoga and meditation. And I just had a very different college life because I knew exactly what I was doing and I was going full throttle right into it.
I'm
And then
just sitting here. Let me take a minute to
sure.
reflect. If you haven't done this for yourself,
Hmm.
that's amazing self-knowledge, self-reflection, and the ability to take control. We're talking teenage to college. That's amazing.
Thank you.
On a spiritual level, I would say you must have had some serious spirit helpers.
I can't vouch for that.
Hmm.
I've had people who are uh, of of that persuasion say
Hmm.
confirm that, and I have people who are just diehard atheists or agnostics
Hmm.
saying like, yeah, you made the best of a really terrible situation, and you just wanted to end suffering for yourself and others, and this was the most
Hmm.
logical, direct pathway forward. And whatever is the ultimate reality, I don't know. I just know that I want to reduce suffering and help other people.
Hmm.
And my
Are you a Buddhist?
people think I am. I'm a
Hmm.
pragmatist.
Hmm.
When people ask me,
That's a kind of a very cliche Buddhist approach, and
sure. I mean,
alleviate suffering.
I wouldn't. I mean, I consider Buddhism more of I mean, I've met the Dalai Lama, and
Hmm.
he said explicitly on stage, he said that the Buddhist religion and Buddhist culture is for Buddhists. Buddhist philosophy is for everybody. So he
Hmm.
was making a distinction between the religious and the cultural
Hmm.
practices and the philosophy. I'm totally cool with the philosophy. I have no interest in the religion or the culture, and good
Yeah,
for them. I have no negative towards them
I
anyway.
don't see you as a dogmatic club joining kind of guy.
No, I did that. I was 10 years in a Hindu cult for 10 years
Hmm.
at one point starting in college, and I got out of that in 2010.
Hmm.
That's going to be the subject of my of a comedy show at some point. Oh, spoiler, I'm also a stand-up comic as part of
Cool,
my advocacy,
cool,
and don't let the academic veneer fool you. I have a full 1 hour show called Neurospicy, Love, Life,
cool,
and Comedy on the Spectrum, which is available for free on YouTube.
cool.
And it's about what it was like to grow up with Asperger's syndrome and obviously still have it.
Hmm.
And it's clean observational comedy, so there's no politics, cursing, or gratuitous body fluid jokes. So it's clean comedy, and
Hmm.
it's the hour I wish I had 40 years ago to share with family, my friends, the schools, the other
Hmm.
gatekeepers in the community at large. And it's it's the way that I can kind of if we're in kind of talking in kind of some spiritual terms, for lack of a better term, and the karma of what happened to me by creating a way that's easily consumable and transmissible, scalable, of like how to better understand people like me, so I didn't that wouldn't suffer so unnecessarily growing up. And I'm working actually on my next comedy show, which
Hmm.
is what it was like to grow up in the 80s. I'm talking about the 80s through the metaphor of my breakfast in the 80s.
Hmm.
So, like the 80s was equal parts nostalgic and sinister. So, on the one hand, you had like parachute pants and the Rubik's Cube, but then you had parental neglect and toxic food.
Hmm.
And I have a working theory is that one of the reasons why Stranger Things is such a massive cultural hit for the past several years is because This is where art imitates life, where all the children of the 80s are now working out their unresolved trauma of the 80s in real time collectively by watching the show about
Hmm.
the 80s and like literal like the shadowy dark forces contrasted next to the cutesy nostalgia. And um so I'm going through like the orange juice, and it's just mostly like sugar and pesticides. The dairy industry actually models the same business plan as the street drug industry. Because what is an ice cream truck but nothing but a mobile dealer announcing his presence to get kids hooked on that sweet, sweet milk.
Hmm.
And the high gluten foods, the process, et cetera, coffee. There was no fancy mochaccino back then, but like rancid Folgers. Uh, so I'm use comedy as my way to educate and advocate. So I've got a show on what's like to have Asperger's. I'm working on what it's growing up in the 80s and toxic food. I'm working on one on escaping a cult, another one on getting out of my two addictions of sugar and video games. And I got a couple others in the works as well. And these are like 3-year projects each.
Hmm.
But the intention again is to reduce suffering. And so you can do it directly with individual or group coaching, but then there's the larger scaling of how do you change consciousness at a larger level. And
Hmm.
that I've concluded the best approach for me, aside from writing books, is stand-up comedy.
Well,
So
that's brave because I don't think first of all, I'm not that funny, but I'm too serious. But I also, anyway, I can stand up and lecture and teach,
Mhm.
but I don't know comedy, I would feel vulnerable.
Comedy is very vulnerable. I do
Mhm.
recommend as if if people want a spiritual practice, take a comedy class to just do your first 5 minutes. Like
Mhm.
if you want it's a it's a crucible for sure, but the
Mhm.
first 5 minutes is the hardest 5 minutes.
Okay.
And the thing about stand-up comedy is that it's made me a better thinker, a better speaker, a better writer because it teaches you how to be concise. Like what
Mhm.
is the most important things to say in a memorable way that's impactful. The end.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's two tricks to writing good stand-up comedy. Never aim for funny, aim for truth. Find the funny in the truth, not the truth in the funny. So as
Mhm.
long as you have a problem you want to solve and you're aiming at truth, you can always find the funny in the truth.
Mhm.
And I always recommend
Mhm.
people write within a group. I always write in a group. I have a writers group that I'm a part of. And and you can totally do it. And it's worth it. I think it's a really valuable experience for people to go through. And the level of confidence and courage that you earn in being on stage and lecturing is relatively easy. I've been lecturing for 25 years. That's easy. You just get up and talk. No problem.
Well, yeah,
But
because you go there holding a position, an inherent position of superiority. So you can have that to bolster you. They have to listen to you. You're the one who knows all the facts. You're the one who's got the brass key, the key of the brass ring or whatever. But comedy, you're putting something out there and you're not sure how it's going to be taken.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the
Mhm.
only art form that's never complete because it's the audience that determines if your art is done or not.
Cool.
It's not, and you can't just repeat your same jokes. It's not like music. You can't get up there and play the same song you've been playing for 40 years. You have to do new stuff. So
Mhm.
it's a
Cool.
crucible. It's worth it, I think, if
Mhm.
people are looking for a new practice.
Mhm.
So my so I went through college and then I went to chiropractic school and I got very heavy into functional neurology and nutrition, and graduated top of my class and ran a bunch of clubs and was a tutor and a TA. And then I traveled and taught around the country to other chiropractors how to pass their national registration exams in both clinical and basic sciences. And then went abroad to open my first practice, and was there for 8 years, and then got an acupuncture degree, got very heavy into functional medicine, studied with Dr. Kalish on the Kalish Institute, and then the Institute for Functional Medicine. And in 2016, I discovered genetics. So I'm in my 10-year geneversary, so to speak.
Mhm.
And what I discovered is that What I discovered is that most people, whatever concern they're having, whether it's they're dealing with stubborn weight or hormone imbalance, or they've got anxiety and high stress, or they're dealing with just a chronic, it's just getting chronically sick all the time, or they're chronically fatigued, or they're in chronic pain. The thing that people were missing is they're missing a framework. They're missing a framework to analyze how to understand what's going on with their health because a lot of people are talking about shiny object syndrome. This is my primary criticism of the biohacker community is that they're just throwing out lots of shiny expensive objects, but there's no map. The objects, the tools are great, asterisk, if the tool is appropriate for the situation that people are in. I love all the tools that are coming out, but is the tool what you need? That's the issue.
So tell me what you mean by the framework and the structure.
So when you're looking at when you're wanting to work with a functional medicine, functional health practitioner, you got to make sure they have two specific frameworks. They have a framework for lifestyle and a framework for labs. So a framework means do they have a system to analyze exercise, digestion, posture and pain, diet, your nutrition, toxic exposures, your morning and evening routines, stressors and unresolved traumas, hidden exposures to infections or mold, sleep hygiene. That's an example of a framework. Like that's my framework. It's looking at
Mhm,
these pillars of health. I have the 10 pillars of health. Other people have the triangle of health or the six steps of this or the triangle of that, the inverted hypotenuse of wellness. I don't care. Some framework because otherwise it's like just shooting in the dark and
mhm,
like hoping you're going to find something if you ask random questions or they don't ask the questions. So having a framework about lifestyle means you're looking at someone from the outside in. Then you have a framework for labs, where you're looking at people from the inside out, looking at the physiology, the biochemistry, the nutrition, the toxic exposures, all from the inside out. So when you combine lifestyle and labs, a framework for looking from the outside in and a framework from looking from the inside out, you combine them together. Congratulations, that's holistic medicine.
mhm.
That is my definition of holistic medicine.
I like.
I would call functional medicine as leveraging the best of Western medicine's lab diagnostics with the best of natural medicine's lifestyle, diet, nutrition interventions. So holism is when you combine lifestyle and labs together. And the framework for labs, look, I've got my framework. There's five lab categories: gut, hormones, mitochondrial metabolism, the weird stuff, Lyme, mold, toxins, uh, environmental toxicity, metals, and weird viruses and infections. And then the fifth one is genetics. So we got gut, hormones, mitochondrial metabolism, the weird stuff, genetics, framework. Do people have other frameworks? Sure, just have a framework. And if you don't have a framework for labs, then you're just guessing or you're just running people through a thing that is just like this is my practice. We do this lab and this lab only, which is fine if you have a practice that attracts people who on the majority really do need that specific lab. And there is value to like these kind of lab in a box practices was like I found that these are the three most important labs that everyone does because 80% of the people need it 80% of the time. And there is a value to that. Is it as specific as it could be? No, but it's something. It is a framework of sorts, but it's not as fully customizable as it could be. I mean, the really good practitioners have kind of like a hybrid where they've got, I mean, the really, really good ones like customized right from the beginning, but the good hybrid
Mhm,
is that they've got like, here's my three labs, and if you plateau and it doesn't get the results we want, then I've got this buffet of a stable of other labs we'll draw on to figure out what's missing, which is a totally fair approach. So, and that's a framework of sorts. So my encouragement to everyone listening is just like as a general rule, when you're going to work with someone, make sure they have a framework, both lifestyle and labs. And there is value to just getting a singular lab, like genetics. Genetics is unusual because your history doesn't influence what your genes are, whereas knowing what you've been through affects. it influences how you look at what your, say, like your gut test looks like or your hormone panel looks like. Like you can be as sleep deprived as anything, and your genes are going to be, the actual gene readout is going to be the same. How your genes express will change, obviously, how you're sleeping and your lifestyle. But if you're wanting to know the raw data of like what are your genes, then the history is not necessary because that doesn't influence what we're seeing in the genetic report. Now, how you live your life and your lifestyle will affect how your genes express. And the best way to think about genetics is like, think of it not as a switch, but as a dial. That people have genetic, we call them green, yellow, red dots. And just to best understand that, yeah, a green dot means a air quotes good gene is that people have, they inherited the air quotes good version of the gene from both mom and dad. That's a green dot. A yellow dot is they got one air quotes bad version from mom, one and a good version from dad, or the reverse. One it doesn't matter from what side. And then a red dot is like, I quote, two bad versions. And the thing that most people think of these as switches, and that's not true. They're more like dials. So people's default setting is how they were born. So if I have a lifestyle and if I'm living my life, I will default to the green expression or the yellow expression or the red expression of a gene, like say for inflammation or for histamine intolerance or for um, vitamin D absorption or any number of things. And my lifestyle will nudge that expression either towards the green or towards the red depending on how I live. But if I want to move it in a specific direction and keep it there, I have to maintain a lifestyle to keep that gene expressing in that direction. Like I can have red and yellow dots, but according to my lifestyle, if it's a good lifestyle, then I can make those green and yellow, those red and yellow dots not be green, but behave green-like. So the
So
good
when you
news,
say lifestyle, are you mostly focusing on nutritional?
no. So nutrition is a major portion of it, but there's also exercise and sleep and morning and circadian rhythms and like morning and evening routines and
And quit
digestion is a huge,
vaping and
yeah, quitting smoking and like
mhm,
all the, removing toxic exposures, whether they're self-inflicted or or from or externalized.
mhm.
um that the good news about running genetics is that now you know what your like I mentioned before, like you asked me what am I? I said, I'm a pragmatist, so I'm a fan of reality, big fan of reality, and I want to know my genetic reality. I want people to know their genetic reality, and their genetic reality is like, what are the boundaries of play here? So some people like me, I found out in 2016 that I'm a hyper-inflamer, which explained why I was so sick growing up. Not, and no, I was so sick because I had a combination of really vulnerable genetics and a really terrible lifestyle. I didn't know any better. I was a kid, and it only took me to my teenage years to figure out I had actually more agency in how I live my life.
And what do you mean by a hyperinflamer?
So when you look at someone's genetics, when we look at genetics from a functional or a more holistic lens, we're looking at we're not chasing down an individual gene necessarily. We're looking at clusters of genes and how they behave in concert. We're looking at the orchestra of genes. So there are 16 major pro-inflammatory genes in the body. There are hundreds of genes that influence inflammation directly and indirectly, but I want the most important ones, and there's 16 of them. So by hyperinflamer, I'm talking about someone who's got like 11 and above of those 16. So you're looking at like the entire constellation of inflammatory genes is like really inflammatory. I have 14 out of 16 genes as red and yellow dots. So a hyperinflamer, meaning that I could be eating, my terrible breakfast growing up, and another family member is eating the same breakfast, but they're not as affected as I am because my genes react much more inflammatory in much more inflammatory ways than they do.
Have you
So
seen that in your clients?
100%.
I
I
mean, the level in my practice, which is traditional Western medicine,
Hmm.
the amount of things that I can attribute to inflammation is sky high.
Yeah, but some people are more sensitive to it and have a faster on-ramp to the inflammatory response than others.
Mhm.
I can give you some examples. I have in the genetics tests that I designed. I've identified three major ways people retain stubborn weight: inflammatory water weight, hormonal toxic weight, and caloric fat weight. The inflammatory water weight by far is the most common cause of stubborn weight gain, by far. Here's an example. I actually call this the muffin test, not the muffin top test, the muffin
Mhm.
test. So the muffin test is you eat half a muffin and proceed to put on an extra 1 to 4 pounds in a single day. Just poof, just poof, just more weight. Now, unless that muffin, half a muffin, came from last year's regifted Christmas fruitcake, it didn't weigh 1 to 4 pounds. So where did all this extra weight come from? If the muffin, it's half the muffin, was absolutely not a pound or certainly not 4 pounds.
All the downstream cascade of crud that gets stimulated.
The inflammatory response.
Mhm.
And then the body retains. So why do we retain water when there's inflammation? Well, all the inflammatory chemicals, so you got the muffin, you've got the gluten, the dough conditioners, the preservatives, the colorings, the sprinkles, whatever leached in from
Mhm.
the plastic wrappy do in it, like just the sugar, all of it creates inflammation, and it creates inflammation in the gut, which is like it creates just cascades inflammation through the whole body. Well, inflammatory chemicals are damaging. They hurt cells and tissues. So what happens is the body will retain water in what's called the interstitial space, which translates from Latin Greek, I forget, the space in between the cells. So it will put water in between the cells to dilute the damaging chemicals from hitting and damaging the cells and tissues. So the weight is not coming from calories. It's coming from water retention secondary to the inflammatory response from the toxicity in those calories that came bundled with the calories. The
Mhm.
calories are the least issue. It's the inflammatory stuff that came bundled with it. Granted, sugar, yes, is technically calories and is inflammatory in its own right. But so the inflammatory water weight, people who have very pro-inflammatory genes, they have this response to the muffin test. People who don't really have an inflammatory response like that don't have that response. They don't have that. They're not triggered by the muffin test. You see it in other ways too. You see it in CrossFit. I can walk into any CrossFit gym, look around, and know who's a hyperinflamer and who's not. You can just look around because the people who are hyperinflamers, they may be strong, but they don't look cut. They don't have their definition because they've got this layer of inflammatory water weight over all their muscles because they're over exercising, and their exercise is now net pro-inflammatory, not anti-inflammatory. So I see this all the time with people who are in CrossFit. The people who are hyperinflamers, so they have a different version of the muffin test. If they don't exercise for a week, whether they're injured or they're traveling or the gym closed or whatever, and then they come back a week later, they look better, they feel better, and they lift stronger. Why? Because their body had a week to deflame. So people who are hyperinflamed, so people who are who over exercise, I actually have to pull them away from exercise and put them on recovery. Like they can still do their high intensity interval training twice a week with at least 2 days break in
I
between.
bet they're not happy with you for that.
Oh no, they're not. Oh,
No.
they're very angry at me. But
Oh, yeah,
they
because
can't deny the truth of what I'm saying.
they're convinced that that is the key to good health and longevity.
Well, here's the thing
Mhm.
is that they usually come back all sulky when they do have a week off, whether they want to or not. And
Mhm.
they admit that, yeah, I look better, I feel better, and I actually was strong. I had a new PR, a personal record. And I'm like, so are we going to debate this any further, or are you going to cling on to this lie
Mhm.
you've been living for however many years? What would you like to do? Just let me know. And And so here's, look, I bag on CrossFit a lot, but I also salvage it. And here's how I salvage it. Here's what they do right. They built a community. They built a community based on celebration of progress, and they have a routine and a culture that supports progress. The problem is that they overdo it and people get injured, and they don't have like a way to dial it back. And so how do I thread the needle if they want to keep their CrossFit community and stay healthy as opposed to hurt themselves? Very straightforward. You keep going to the gym on the hour you do a day or whatever it is, but you don't do high intensity interval stuff. You do like walking, light bicycle. You do movement, not exercise. I make that distinction. Movement, not exercise. Moving is good. Over exercising, bad. So they get to stay in their community. They get to keep going to the gym, but they don't overdo it. So you work. So this is the way to thread the needle, that to accomplish both. So the same thing with the inflammatory with diet. I'll give you one example. My father took me years to convince him to just do one day where he wouldn't eat toasted bread and cheese, a couple times a day. And he's overweight and hates exercise. And I just convinced him for one day to have as much chicken, broccoli, coconut oil, and coffee as he wanted. And he didn't have to exercise, which he doesn't do anyway. And I just wanted to show him that he can lose a lot of weight without cutting calories because he's inflamed, not fat. He's inflamed from
Hmm.
water, not inflamed from calories.
Hmm.
Finally, he did it. I watched him. I was there. Didn't do any exercise, shocker. But he ate chicken, broccoli, coconut oil, coffee, didn't have any dairy, didn't have any gluten. He had plenty of calories. He weighed himself every day, done it for decades. Weighed himself before, weighed himself the very next morning. He lost 4 pounds, according to him. So what he lost was not calories because he ate and he didn't exercise. What he lost was all the water weight that was retained by inflammation. His body had one day to drop inflammation
Did
because he
he
wasn't.
notice it?
He's the one who told me.
But I mean, he felt it in his body.
He felt it, but the problem
Hmm.
is that when you're dealing with someone who prefers comfort over longevity, he just went back to eating what he found was
Yeah.
comfortable and tasty. So I
Yeah.
gave up after that, you
Yeah.
know. I
So
mean,
we have about 8 to 10 minutes left.
okay.
What else do you see in your practice? And what things have you noticed that are going on in the world today?
Sure. So from a genetic standpoint, when people are concerned about their long-term health, well-being, longevity, or just simply like their mood, what I've noticed that people genetically are influenced in several major ways. In the genetics tests, if you're a hyperinflamer, it's going to affect your mood because if your brain's inflamed, then you can't what's called inhibit your limbic centers. You can't inhibit the animalistic stress responses. Your frontal lobes are very fragile and they're very vulnerable to inflammation. So if you know genetically that you're a hyperinflamer and you take on the strategies that are offered from a genetic level, then you can drop the level of inflammation globally in your body and including your brain. As a hyperinflamer, I had lots of anxiety and anger and skin rashes and physical pain. I had inflammation in my joints like an 80-year-old man, even though I was in my 30s. And then when I got my genetics reports back, it took only a couple months of changing my diet, my lifestyle, nutrition, etc., according to my genes, and all the pain in my joints went away, my skin cleared up.
Mhm.
Okay, my anxiety reduced and the anger reduced, and it's just like they're tools offered in genetics you cannot find in the other tests. Other things that I learned is that people are worried about stress and anxiety. Well, you want to get your genetic tests want to include are you for your caffeine sensitivity, which I have. I have a big red dot in caffeine sensitivity because if you're genetically sensitive to caffeine, you're going to get what's called, and this is true, caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. Caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. So people who think that they're taking coffee and shoving it full of coconut oil because it's bulletproof, which is what I did. I was conflating anxiety for energy and genetics. So I got off coffee, caffeine, because it was in my genetics. I just had to take myself accountable. It's no different than a CrossFitter having to come to terms with the fact that they're overinflamed and they have to change their lifestyle, I had to come to terms that I was hypersensitive to coffee and I had to get off caffeine. I don't I don't when I talk about this towards the CrossFitters, I'm speaking from my own experience too. I'm an overinflamer. I couldn't overexercise because I got weaker if I overexercise. So, other things around mood is some people are genetically histamine intolerant. Now, histamine is an adjacent inflammatory pathway to the body. It's basically the body's flood switch. When a bee stings your arm, the bee did not inject a half quart of water into your arm to make it swell.
Hmm.
What happened is that it's venom. Like a bee, a wasp, a spider, a centipede, a snake, it's venom. Certain plants, your body will pull the flood switch of histamine to drown the area in water to dilute the venom. It's no different philosophically than your body having an inflammatory response from the muffin to dilute the toxic chemicals, inflammatory chemicals, but this is venom. So it's like rapidly flood the area locally.
Hmm.
So if you're very sensitive to histamine and you eat high histamine foods like, and I say this at great personal risk, avocados, you are doing the equivalent of eating a slow-moving full body bee sting and creating a global inflammatory histamine response in people who struggle with hives and water weight gain and foggy brain and um, water weight and just like you may be sensitive to
What
histamine.
else are high histamine producing foods? Because I'm the kind of person, one mosquito bite, my whole arm is a
Uh,
mess.
so so there's whole lists of them, but like the big ones
Okay.
that people have are aged meats and cheeses, long-term leftovers, cacao, tea, alcohol, citrus fruits, avocados.
Kind of interesting. A lot of those things trigger migraines.
Correct. So
Interesting.
histamine and
Mhm.
tyramine. So you get headaches and migraines from histamine, but also tyramine. And tyramine and histamine usually are in the same foods, not all, but
Mhm.
usually very similar. And putting someone on an antihistamine diet is really hard because there's so many quote health foods that are high in histamine. And fortunately, like with the genetics test, I've developed a diet that is a winnable high histamine elimination diet. And I developed the diet after I argued with with a client of mine for 45 minutes over avocados. He just wouldn't let it go. He just wouldn't let it go. I was like, okay, fine, I need to find a different system here to how to make this work. And I
So,
figured it.
Dr. Sam, how can people find you and work with you?
Sure. So the easiest way is to go to my website, drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. You can opt in for my free masterclass. My DNA Decoded program is right at the top of the screen there. People use the code GOLD100 for $100 off the Gold program. The Gold program includes group coaching with me for the genetics.
Hmm.
And if people are wanting, if anyone here listening is a certified health coach or a licensed practitioner, and you want to run my genetics in your practice, you can go to fitgenesusa.com, FITGENES USA.com, and you can sign up to become a practitioner, and I train you how to run these genetics tests in your practice.
Hmm.
I've solved for a number of major issues in the genetics space. The first problem people struggle with is they get a genetic test from another company and it's hundreds of genes with the attending hundreds of lifestyle recommendations, and it's overwhelming, confusing, and ultimately paralyzing. I figured out how to prioritize. These are the things to do for
Hmm.
diet, lifestyle, exercise, nutrition in this order, so it's way simpler. I've reduced the interpretation time down from hours to a fraction of that because now you have prioritized genes and prioritized lifestyle recommendations, and the reports are beautiful and they're practical, and the lay public can really, really understand them, and they're not drowning in like these hexadecimal hieroglyphic RSID numbers that you
Hmm.
see of all these genetics. Like it's like all these other genetics reports are so difficult.
Hmm.
And these are now simple to understand and more importantly, implement. The last thing I would say is that there's a unique genetic test that is so rare to find. And this is one where we're looking at a very specific gene, not the version of it, but how many duplicates of it, that tells you, are you more ideally suited for keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb, or some shade of gray in between? We can end this whole nonsense of like, this diet's the best. This diet's the best. No. How about this diet is the best for you based on your
Hmm.
genetics? And we can stop arguing between carnivore and vegan and high carb. We can end all that by finding out what's relevant to you. And that's a part of my DNA Decoded program for individuals who just want their genes. And it's also part of what I train health coaches and practitioners in to run in their own practice. So that's what I'm offer. I'm also coming out with a Fit Genes podcast where I educate the public and practitioners how to better understand the genes.
Wonderful. I appreciate your smarts so much,
Thank
your
you.
big brain that has taken these things that are out there that people get so confused by and made them accessible and understandable. So everybody, if you want to work with Dr. Sam, it's drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
It was very nice meeting you.
You too.
You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.